Hello everybody, welcome back to the Vintage Workshop. My name's Jeff Heath. Just like in the previous video at the end, I kind of told you that I wanted to do a few videos on hand tools, and we're going to start out by talking about hand planes. Specifically, hand planes, they can be broken into many different categories because there's lots of different kinds. What I want to focus on today is looking at bench planes, because really I think a great place for a starting woodworker or somebody who's been woodworking a long time with power tools and is looking to upgrade their game for finishing and for being able to trim and for being able to fine-tune a board or a joint or a dovetail or something like that. You're really going to be starting out your hand plane collection with something that I see on the forums, on the online forums all the time, is if I had to start out with one plane, what do you recommend it should be? For me, guys, and by the way, this is all just my opinion, but for me, that's a really hard question to narrow down an answer to for just one plane. Really, I think if you're just getting started, you should probably consider, when you're just getting started, I really think an excellent idea to go ahead and get started with is perhaps just getting into like some old Stanleys. First of all, they're everywhere. You go to a flea market, and you can find planes, if you're a reasonably decent haggler at garage sales or at flea markets, you can find planes like this. This is a Stanley Bailey. It's a number 5. It's a jack plane. I think I paid $5 for this plane. Somebody had it on a shelf. It was all rusted out, sitting at a garage sale, I don't know, 20 years ago. And it's not even an older one. There are better vintage years for these, but I bought this plane. I took it, brought it home. I took it apart. I cleaned it up. I filed down the frog, and I got the mating surfaces all working well. This is not a bedrock style. For those of you that are not familiar, there's the Stanley Bailey plane, which is the lesser expensive version, and then there's the bedrock plane, typically but not always signified by the flat side on the sides. These bedrock planes were made as an upgrade because they're basically having a bedrock frog, which basically gives them a much better purchasing area, and the frog is mounted to the sole of the plane, the bed of the plane, excuse me, much more rigidly and better. But those areas, they all require work on the older used planes. So if you're really not familiar with the inner workings of how these planes should be tuned up before using, because most of them do need tuning, then you should probably invest in a good book. I would highly recommend, there's a old hand planes book called the Hand Plane Book by Garrett Hack. To me, there's several of them, but to me that is one of the best ones of really getting involved in talking about taking about a plane, what makes a plane work well versus one that doesn't. And when you guys get an opportunity to go ahead and take a plane that you buy from from a flea market or a garage sale that's just in kind of ratty condition, you go ahead, you sharpen up the iron, you start taking it to wood, and the thing is, it's chattering all over the place. There's a lot more to getting a plane work correctly than just sharpening the iron and putting it to wood. We're going to cover that in another video, but right now I just wanted to discuss the different types of planes. So back to the question, what plane should I get if I was only getting one plane? Well, honestly, I would tell you that you would want to get two planes. You'd want to get a block plane. This is the Lee Nielsen version of the old Stanley. I believe it's number 60 and a half. And to me, this is probably the plane I use more than any other plane in here, because this is great for just trimming. You can trim end grain, you can trim edges, you can create bevels. You just got a little bit of an area that's got a little bit of a hump that you want to clean up. You want to take a little small apron plane with you to the wood supply store. Make sure you ask first, but you can spray a little water on a piece of wood to bring out the grain. You can also take a little block plane and create a few small shavings in an area. That'll give you an idea of the quality and the color of the rough sawn board. You don't want to mess around spending 3, 4, 5 hours doing all the necessary work to an older vintage plane. Then I would recommend buying a brand new one from Lee Nielsen, because then what you have in front of you is a plane that is going to work perfectly for you out of the box. You're going to get an opportunity to see what a really good working plane does. And then what you can do is start adding to your vintage tool collection and start working on one of those and comparing it to the Lie-Nielsen. Now, I don't only want to be talking about just Lie-Nielsen here, even though those are the planes that I most frequently buy. I was gifted a Veritas plane. This particular one happens to be a number 6, and I can honestly tell you, I'm equally impressed with them. They're out of Canada, Lee Valley Tools. Also very excellent made, and I know there's always a big debate, Lee Valley versus Lie-Nielsen on a lot of the forums. I don't want to get into that. That's a personal choice, guys. You guys support and buy whatever company you feel comfortable buying with, but I would recommend that if you're just getting going, one of those two. So, you know, one of the, I was talking about versatility with a plane like this. One of the great things about if you just had one bench plane besides your block plane, you got to have a little block plane. So let's set this aside for a minute. If you just had to get one bench plane and try to do a lot of different functions with it, this is the plane, and here's why. It's a low angle bed, so it's basically designed for handling edge grain, end grain on the end of a board. You can literally take this plane, turn a board up on end in your vise, and smooth off the end. You got to do a few little things worrying about tear out the ends of the grain, but once you do that, and you know how to work the plane correctly, you can smooth end grain on the end of a table or end of a board or an end of a box that's with end grain showing to just as smooth as a smoothing plane would finish the top of a tabletop. Another nice feature is you can use this as a roughing plane. What I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to move you in here so that I can show you some of this stuff up close. Okay, so now that I've got you moved in closer, I wanted to just talk to you about some of the features on the low angle jack plane. This plane has an adjustable mouth, and what that means is that the front part of the sole of the plane will open and close depending on whether you're doing rough work or whether you're trying to do really fine finish work. The tighter the mouth you get, and as you can see right now I've got it set for smoothing, there's just zero opening there just for the finest of shavings, and that's great for end grain work. It's also great if you're trying to flatten out a burl type wood or a knotty grained wood or some like crotch walnut where the grain is undulating and switching directions and stuff like that. Very important to be able to have that. Another really nice feature of this plane is its versatility with being able to perform quite a few functions at once. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. This is the standard low angle iron, and as you can see there's some shavings in there because I was using it, but it's basically set at a low angle of 12.5 degrees plus the iron angle sharpened at 25 degrees. Another option, and I'm going to put this in nice and close for you, this is a toothing plane. I don't know if you can see the teeth on the end of the where the cutting edge is, but a toothing plane is outstanding to be used in this plane on that really rough gnarly wood that you're just trying to basically get down smooth and you're experiencing a lot of tear out with it. So what you do is you take the toothing plane, and the toothing plane basically planes, and as it's planing it serrades that gnarly switching grain on boards like elm and some very difficult oaks, and quite often on like mahogany or walnut crotchwood where you want to smooth it out, but you still got a ways to go to get it all flat. And this is really a handy extra iron that you can buy. You don't have to buy a whole nother plane, guys. You just spend $40 or $45, whatever it is, on an extra iron, and you've got a whole nother iron in your toolkit to be used with the exact same plane. Now, a lot of guys talk about high angle smoothers, being able to increase the angle of attack of a plane up to 55, 60, even 62 degrees in order to deal with very difficult, hard, dense hardwoods like the Australian hardwoods, as well as difficult woods like ultra curly cherry and bird's eye where you're getting a lot of tear out. You can take the standard iron, buy an extra one, and put a micro bevel about 1 millimeter or 2 long, 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch long, at a much higher angle. So you've got your 12.5 degree bed angle for the plane. And if you go ahead and you grind the tip of this iron down to say 50 degrees, you've got a 62.5 degree smoother once you reinstall this iron in the plane, and it's going to have a really steep angle. On a regular plane, you would end up having to move the iron and frog assembly forward, and at some point you can only move it so much, and that's what's nice about having the adjustable mouth, because with this plane, after you go ahead and do that, I'm hoping you guys can see, this mouth is completely adjustable, so you can open it all the way up, or you could close it down as tight as you want to make the adjustments so that you've got a really good chip breaker control when you are using a high angle iron installed in the plane. So, all right, get rid of that stuff. So in order to be able to make this plane as versatile as possible, you literally could have it with 3 separate irons, and it'll just do a ton of really great work for you. So let me set this aside, and then I want to carry on discussing, all the other types of bench planes and what their uses are for. I'm sure everybody knows smoothing planes. Smoothing plane is generally one of the more popular planes that people buy. You're going to use this for smoothing out your tabletops. This is a high angle Lee-Nielsen. You could also get just a regular number 4 or a 4.5. This happens to be the 4.5 version, which is just a little bit of a wider iron. In wood, you've got, this is a plane that I made. This is a smoothing plane at 50 degrees set up. This is, with Ron Hawk's small irons for wooden planes that you make yourself. You also have the traditional style wooden plane, which is a one-piece plane. I make these, not this particular one. This is a vintage one, roughly about 100-year-old American-made plane that's set up at 55 degrees. And this is a really good smoothing plane for, it's made out of beech, and this is a double iron plane made from, I believe it's the Faro Company. Yeah, Faro Company. To me, a relatively obscure American company. I bought this plane on eBay. I believe I paid $10 for it, and the mouth's a little big, but because it is a double iron, I smoothed it out, I tuned it up, and it's a great working, I think it's, 8 inches, 7.5 inches, 8-inch smoothing plane that has a 2 1/4 wide iron, and just another smoothing plane in my arsenal. Here's another one that I made myself, very similar, another coffin smoother. This one I made out of 2 pieces out of maple. This is a single iron, works great also. So you have a lot of choices with the smoothing planes. Once you're comfortable with your smoothing plane setup, and you start wanting to do a lot more work with hand tools instead of the power tools, you're going to start looking at the next step, in my opinion, which would be getting yourself a number 6 size or a triplane. This is a Bedrock style number 606. That was an absolute train wreck that I bought at a flea market for 20 bucks. And I remember because the lady only wanted $10 for it. It was her husband's who had passed away. It was completely covered in tar and rust. The iron, this is not the original iron with it. The original iron was really badly rusted and pitted. It had been sitting in the garage for a very long time. I went ahead, I completely disassembled this. I threw it over in the sandblaster, completely sandblasted everything off. I got rid of, there wasn't very much of the Japanning, which is the black paint in this area here. The original was almost all gone from the rusting anyway. So I basically just completely cleaned it up. This particular one is a corrugated bottom, as you can see. And I went ahead, cleaned it all up. I repainted. I didn't use Japanning. I just used Rust-Oleum, the hammer tone paint. Guys, I'm not a tool collector. I'm a tool user, so I really don't care about the value of the plane being original and all that other nonsense. To guys that are tool collectors, that stuff may be very important. To me, who is a user, all I care about is how well it performs when it's in contact with wood. So I went ahead and painted it up to protect it, and I went ahead and flattened the sole. I cleaned up, as you can see, the rosewood handles are in terrific condition, so I cleaned those up. I went ahead and bought a Ron Hawk replacement iron and a replacement chip breaker. This makes it much, much thicker. Here actually is the original iron for this plane. I went ahead and sandblasted it too just to clean it up. but it's, you know, the thin Stanley. This is from the Sweetheart era. It's the ultra thin blades, and when I'm using my number 6, guys, I'm giving it a serious workout. I put a slightly cambered iron on there. I use this plane all the time for flattening my workbench, for taking big wide slabs, tabletops, and just going to town on them. A lot of guys use scrub planes. I don't even own one. I will take a plane like this, camber the iron, because I like the mass, and just, you know, go to work, removing a lot of wood, getting all the high spots down. That's what this plane is designed to do. You're using this plane mostly as a roughing plane. You want to set it with a relatively rank setting. What I mean by that is you're going to be taking some chips with this plane, not thin, fine, wispy shavings. You can set it up that way. In fact, once you start getting a bunch of these, you'll have some number 6s that are set up in a format like what I call a panel smoother, which is just a big smoothing plane for smoothing out larger surfaces, and set it with a real fine cutting, and these things will work just as good as a smoothing plane that way. Actually, that's how I have this set up right now. You can see the mouth is just ultra tight on this, and that's one of the nice things about the frog settings on these bedrock planes is you can move the entire frog assembly forward for a very tight shaving, wispy shaving like a smoothing plane, or if you need to really crank out some wood fast and remove 1/8 of an inch of wood on a tabletop, you can move this back, open up the mouth, set that iron down a little deeper with a camber on it, and really go to town on it. And that's what this plane excels at. Once you're done with, well, you know what, before I move on from that, the similar plane to that in a wooden style is this here triplane. Longer, but basically set up to do the same thing. This is a 21-inch triplane made out of locust that I made myself probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Wooden plane, single iron, set up with a slightly open mouth, as you can see, and for the sole purpose of getting rid of wood very fast. This thing is going to go across the top of a slab of wood and remove the high spots, and you get a workout doing it, and you get the work done quickly. And that's, you know, basically the wooden version. As you can see, the handle here, the tote, is relatively big on this plane. I got big hands, so I make the totes to fit my hands for my planes. Obviously, when I'm making planes for customers, I go ahead and size the tote opening based on, you know, the size of their hand. So, you know, once you're done with the triplane, you're going to be moving on to a joiner plane for basically putting your final flattening to a surface before you move on to a smoothing plane. This happens to be the number 7, which is the shorter of the two. This one here is the number 8. This one was given to me when I purchased a series of tools. I'm sure you guys, if you guys watched the video about my Oliver lathe, the guy that had sold me the Oliver lathe actually had this plane in the garbage can, believe it or not. This is a number 8 Stanley. Pretty rough shape. I don't know if you can see it. The handle, the tote here is broke. It's a low knob plane compared to the higher knob on this one. This particular plane, the number 7 on the right side here, the one that I'm shaking, this plane is near and dear to my heart. My father-in-law, my wife's father, Al, he basically got me started in the trades, and he was a home builder. This was his plane. He pretty much used this plane solely for the purpose of fitting and trimming doors that he was installing in houses. He was a very, very talented craftsman. He was not really a woodworker, so to say. I mean, he could do fine finish work if he needed to, but he built houses for a living. He did so for, you know, roughly 40 years. And I didn't know how to swing a hammer when I met him, basically, and he really, really was my mentor when it comes to you know, getting involved in the trades and for a living. He was an integral part of helping me get involved in the mudjacking business because he helped me get set up with finding equipment and stuff way back before the internet even existed, when you didn't have Google to sit down at and be able to find anything you needed within 15 minutes. So at any rate, this was his plane. As you can see, I haven't done anything to it other than I flattened the sole for use. I kept the original iron in it. I sharpened the iron and I use it as is. Every time I have this plane in my hand, it reminds me of being around him. And that's a wonderful feeling for me. So we just covered one segment of hand planes, and that is the bench plane. There are several other segments, and I think we're going to go ahead and keep this short and sweet. And but I will just touch on it for you guys so you know that what's upcoming. You've got specialty planes that are not just bench planes, but specifically designed for certain tasks, like a plow plane for grooving. You've got spoke shaves, which are these right here. Spoke shaves are used for trimming curved work and straight work and flat work. I use them extensively in chair building. You've also got hand router plane, and you've got your shoulder planes, rabbiting planes. This is the wooden one, and of course here's a vintage wooden one that I restored myself. This one's 7/8, this one's 1.5 inches. This one happens to be skewed. You've also got, here's a Lee Nielsen smaller rabbiting shoulder plane for small, fine, intricate, detailed work. You've also got your specialty block planes, which is this one here, which is a rabbiting block plane. Unlike the regular block plane, this one cuts all the way to the edge, so you can get right in the corner of a rabbit. What else we got down here? I also have, this one looks exactly like the number 62 low angle jack plane that I spent some time talking about, except this is a number 610 rabbiting jack plane, and this is just an outstanding plane for plane making, for getting into the edges and just doing some fine tuning work on a rabbit, fitting it perfectly. I use it all the time in my plane making. So we'll discuss these planes in a whole nother video, but for now I wanted to get you guys going with what I felt was a really good starting point for understanding and using bench planes in the workshop. If you guys haven't had an opportunity to see what a finely tuned smoothing plane or block plane or jack plane or joiner plane or triplane can do for you, whether you go with metal or whether you go with wood, I encourage you to try both. You will settle on whatever you feel is more comfortable for you, and quite honestly, I prefer the wooden planes in many instances because of the feedback you get when you're using wood on wood. There's nothing like that beautiful sound of that you get when you're rubbing a piece of hardwood with a nice wooden plane that just gives you a feedback of feeling of the wood when you're really getting in tune with the work you're doing. You just don't get that as much with the metal planes, but that is something for you guys to figure out on your own. I just wanted to give you a quick synopsis of what I felt was a good starting point with bench planes. We're going to also do another video on hand saws and discussing my saws and why I have what I have. And a lot of guys look at somebody's toolbox and say, that guy's a collector, he's got 17 saws over there. That may or may not necessarily be the truth, because just like with planes, different saws have different functions, and depending upon the kind of work you do, you may have specific saws set up like I do for a specific task. I hope you guys are enjoying the content that I'm trying to provide for you. Please give me a thumbs up, clicking that like button. That helps me a lot, that helps the channel grow. And also, I am on Facebook, and I am getting ready to start an Instagram account, so look for that if you guys are on Instagram. I'm going to start posting pictures of my work, and also a lot of the things that we discuss here, and pictures that you don't see in the videos. I'm going to start putting that up on both Facebook and on Instagram. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, and whenever you can, I really do appreciate it when you guys share the videos that I've created. So please put them out on social media that you are involved in. Share it with your friends. And last but not least, guys, I love the comments. I've said it almost every single video. I really enjoy the interaction and the question and answer session that I get. When I come home from work, I click on my my video page and I see that some of you have left comments, so please continue to do so. If there are specific things that you guys would like have answered, both about planes or any of the videos that you've seen, by all means leave them in the comment. You can also send me an email anytime you want. I'm going to list my email below while I'm talking to you right now, but the best way to get a hold of me is on my woodworking email address, which is planemaker9 gmail.com, and I will list it below. If you guys want to get in touch with me directly with a specific question, or you want to talk about planes, or specific question about mud jacking or the sawmill or anything else that you see as far as content goes, or if there's something specifically you guys would like to see in the form of a video that I haven't done yet, by all means get in contact with me. And I'm always looking for new, fresh ideas for video content. So if you guys have some thoughts on that, by all means leave them below. For now, have a great Memorial Day weekend. Hope you guys get a chance to spend some time with your family and friends. That's exactly what I'm going to go do right now. I'm going to head out to a barbecue party up in Lake Delavan, Wisconsin. So have a great time, and we'll be seeing you very soon with the next video.